This is my pleasure to invite Raphaël Dandrimont from Joint Research Center, from the Mars unit, the Monitoring of Agriculture by Remote Sensing unit, which is one of the famous places in Europe because according to my personal review, but also by many people, this is the place where there is the most advanced operational system for yield forecast, production forecast, and this is actually a mandate that they got to do it for the European Commission. And therefore, they've gained, out of 30 years of experience, a huge experience over Europe, and they expand also this to different places in the world. Raphaël is a guy innovative in this place. He's not involved in the routine work, but more in the innovation aspect. And we have the pleasure to have Raphaël Dandrimont for 45 minutes. And then it will be Albert Oliosio, who just joined us. I saw him somewhere. Ah, okay. And he will talk about the water stress, the evapotranspiration, and this will be the most advanced aspect of this training. Thank you for your attention, because it will be very, very tough.
Well, thank you all, and good morning. So I had the opportunity to present this, so, they asked me to do a training about novel in situ collection approach, which is an extremely wide topic. So this lecture will not be exhaustive in the field, but we will try to bring you to a journey with different types of experience we had and also things we are seeing on this field. So as I was already introduced by Pierre de Fourny, I'm from the GRC, which is the European Commission Knowledge and Science Service. We are about 3,000 researchers there, located in 6 different countries. Basically, our goal is providing science evidence to policymakers, helping them to shape policy for the future. What is in situ data? You had already a really intense lecture, and you had the opportunity on Wednesday to have an in situ data lecture. But here, the definition that we will use here is my definition, basically, of in situ data for EO agriculture. It could be crop type information, phenology information, agricultural practices, biophysical variable, as was introduced by Marie Weiss yesterday, and any type of data which is collected on the ground or obtained from data analysis. They are usually collected for training, calibration, algorithms, and also for validation the results. You know, and I think you're well aware after this 5-day training that we are in a momentum in the remote sensing community at some point. We have now the Sentinels becoming free. The processing capabilities are extremely cheap or even free sometimes. So how to basically do some innovation to have high quality products? There is 2 different ways to do that, basically. One is developing new methodology, like classification, AI methodology, and the other one is in situ data. So that's why in situ data remains the holy grail of remote sensing. It was already in the past, but today, because the 2 other problems, let's say, about data and data processing are almost solved, remote sensing is gaining traction there. What is the context for agriculture now? Well, you know this kind of definition that you can find in the literature about big data. If you apply it in agriculture, so big data can be basically defined with 5 V's. One of these V is the volume. In the EU, we have about 70 million of parcels that are harvested every year. For this now, with the 3 Sentinel, we have more than 300 observations per year. So it's a huge amount of information. Well, this information has also a huge variety, meaning that you can get information from weather information, from the market, and also for a wide range of new type of data that we will try to describe in this lecture. Also, big data is defined by its velocity. Velocity, for example, of processing. We have new cloud processing facilities like the DIAS, Google Earth Engine, or other clouds like that you can find. and also new technology that are gaining, coming also in the farms, like you may have all this AgriBot and UAV that are connected together. You get this data extremely velocity. What are the two missing V's? The two missing V's are the veracity and the values. And this is what we try to look at with our team from the food security unit in the GRC. We're trying to look at new type of methods to collect this information. I've tried to separate this in 4 different chapters, if you want. That will be the outline of my lecture. First of all, administration data, which is a hidden gold mine that could be used for remote sensing community. Then the survey, and crowdsourcing, and finally, farmers' data. Let's start with the survey part. Traditional roadside survey, you know quite well about it now. It was introduced by Pierre de Fourny 2 days ago. Roadside data collection were done. There was some JCAM guidelines that were describing this way of collecting data. So they mentioned the windshield strategy. The sensing strategy is extremely important together with the density of your sample. There is a recent paper from a former colleague showing, and it was already explained by Pierre 2 days ago, that basically you should really go for random sampling or the roadside sampling if you have the opportunity to do it. Well, all this is pretty known now. So why looking at new ways to collect massive information for the roadside data collection? Well, first of all, traditional surveying lacked the scale that is needed for big data analytics. Second, they could be prone to sampling errors. They require also a huge amount of money and organizational effort. You know, you have to send people on the field. It's probably most of you have been on the field. It's really time consuming. And also for agriculture specifically, it's pretty difficult because you need, if you want to really monitor agriculture, you need a resample, which is spatially and temporally independent at some points. It brings me to the first case study that we've done, basically. So it was about grasslands. So you know probably that grasslands is a key biotope because they store a lot of carbon in the soil, so they can be used for climate change mitigation, but they're also an habitat for plants and animals. Well, in EU, they are declining since the 60s, so this is the reason why there were several policies trying to basically mitigate this decline. This is why we are pretty interested in monitoring the permanent grassland. At the same time, last year, there was a new regulation for the Common Agricultural Policy monitoring that allows now the member states to do full-scale monitoring, while in the past, in order to allocate properly the subsidies, they were looking only at 5% of the parcels. Now, this paradigm shift brings the scientific community to think about, well, how should I define some elements to be able to control and monitor all these parcels? There are well-known projects to do that, including the Sen4CAP project. Maybe you heard about it before. And in this case, we were interested basically to define markers to detect if the grassland were still permanent or not. So basically, to explain it, farmers are declaring that they have a permanent grassland, for example. They get money for this because it's good for environment. And then the authority, they have to check that it's a permanent grassland, right? Because otherwise you pay something that is not done. So we've tried to find these kind of markers. And at the same time, we were looking at a new way to collect in situ data. So first of all, the markers, well, you heard a lot about it during the week, so I will not spend too much time here. But here we were looking at Sentinel-1, VV, VH, and coherence. We did the classification with TensorFlow. And we were looking at Sentinel-2 bare soil index, basically, which 2 different type of data that could be used for the plowing detection, basically. We run this on a region in the Netherlands. I will explain afterwards why. And then we were able to mark, basically, all the red parcels here were different markers. And we wanted to know if it was good or not, basically typical validation. So we had only 1 day to do this validation. We optimized a routing for this. And we went in the Netherlands, so I took a backpack with me with the camera, and we put the camera on top of a car. Okay? That's where we started. So in one day, we were able to monitor basically more than 200 parcels. So really, we stop, we check like the typical agronomic roadside collection that we are all doing, basically. But then also, as the camera was on, we were passing through about 1,500 parcels. So back from the field, then in the office, we were looking a bit at this data, and was pretty. So here you see a bit the density. Each point is a picture, basically, for, well, this is a pretty huge field for the Netherlands, but just to show a bit the density of image that you may get. And for this field experiment, basically, we were only using a forward-looking camera. Then we did a sample on all these 1,500 parcels, and we take the pictures, and 3 of us, so me and 2 colleagues, basically, like machine, we analyze ourselves the image, and we were saying, okay, is it a grassland or not? What is it, maize, and something like this, okay? So what we've shown there, basically, is that this way, first of all, for the marker part, we find a way to basically catch this declared permanent grassland, which are not the permanent grassland. But then, using the street-level imagery, we were able, basically, to use this 1,500 parcel instead of the 200 parcel that we visit. So we increased, basically, our efficiency of collection by a factor 7. But still, what if a machine could do the job for us? That's really something we want to do, basically, in an automated way. And recently, there is also, in the visual data capture, a paradigm shift. Well, we all have a phone with a camera now in our pockets. By 2022, there will be 44 billion of cameras. But what is also interesting is that the distribution of this camera is switching from smartphone to objects at some point. Will be car taking pictures and different type of objects. It's a bit frightening at some point, but it's what is occurring now. So last year, 1.5 trillion of images were taken, and by 2050, the estimation is that 700 trillions of pictures will be taken. So, well, it's a bit frightening, but at the same time, it's opened some opportunities. At the same time, 1 year ago, I was really inspired by 2 excellent papers. One was published by the group of computer vision in Stanford, where they were using basically street view imagery, a lot of street view imagery with a sample of the United States to collect information about car, so accurate car model. From this, they infer the voting pattern as Democrat or Republican. It was extremely accurate. They were able to, I mean, you should really check this paper. And it's simple. The head of the lab, Fei Li, is the head of artificial intelligence in Google. So you see this kind of person were really clever. It's a bit frightening, but it's also showing that this type of data that you don't think about this to use it for spatial analysis, you can use it now. Another really interesting paper was about the Treepedia, so published by the MIT group, and they were interested in basically monitor the tree within the city from the street view imagery. So you can Google Treepedia. There is a website where you have a lot of cities of the world, and you can see every point where there is a tree in the city. Well, at the same time, there are evolving capabilities in IT. I don't need to spend time on this, but cloud computing, GPU, which is extremely optimized for the AI and the computer vision. And all this data could be also stored on collaborative platform, and thus providing a really important crowdsourcing potential. I will come back to this crowdsourcing afterwards. Still, in this context, I mentioned that the CAP, so the Common Agricultural Policy, was shifting from this 5% check to the 100%. Also, the farmers know, and it's in the regulation in the EU, will be able, when we are not sure with the satellites of what we have on the ground, to send geotag pictures. Here it's an example. For example, the farmer is sending a picture showing the species richness of a grasslands. all this data will at some point need to be analyzed and processed. There is also other problems that we are solving now, like the authentication of the pictures, because when it's about money and public money, you have to be sure about the quality. So now we are working with the agency in Prague for the Galileo security of the signal. Well, now you have a bit the context, and the next question then is, can we recognize crop from pictures? So you have the usually cat and dog stuff that you all know, okay? But here, that's how it starts a bit. We want to know basically if it's grass or mice. You know, it's from the study that we've done about the grasslands. And to do that in a more structural way, basically, we have used this setup. So it's the setup I've shown to you on the field 2 days ago. So 2 action camera, basically. And then we have also a high-resolution camera, Nikon, to collect in situ information, and agronomist on board of the car. Well, you can see here the survey that we were doing, basically. So this field campaign was done last year, and there is another field campaign this year with the company TerraSphere, which is based in the Netherlands, basically. So we monitor 1,500 parcels. So you see here is the tracking. Huh? All the white stuff are the parcels, basically. And all the points are the parcel for which we collect detailed BBCH information together with image. We have about 17 different crops, and we collect last year about 200,000 images. The surveyor have been 8 times on the field, so in March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. And that's the number of the pictures. So you have about 6,000 pictures for which you have really detailed information, and 25,000 for which you have the agricultural parcel. So the blue one basically are trash pictures that are not really useful for the crops. Well, this is just an overview of all the crops and different type of image. So it's just an example of each of the different BBCH stage for different crops. That's for maize, for example. So you have maize 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you see a bit the type of data we are dealing with. So a lot of noise in the data. You say, what can I do with this? You have roads sometimes, you have forest like here, sky, the illumination is changing, windmill, like buffer strips here. It's pretty tricky. Then we had to basically attach all the pictures to the parcels. We select only the class for which we have a representative number of images. So here you have all the different crops with the different colors and all the different BBCH stage. And basically, we wanted to be pretty confident, so we use only the BBCH combination crops where we have at least 300 images for this setup, for the training. Well, something that appears here is the trash class. So for example, you have a lot of pictures that were basically badly classified, so we had to do it iteratively. When you do this kind of stuff in AI, basically you have to classify first, then you look at the class that are extremely bad, and then you take them out, and then you redo it, and so that's the trash class. Well, for the computing and what we've done there, so we have a colleague here, Momo, that is really the guy doing who's had the hands here on this works, and basically we benchmark a bit what was the best deep learning network there, and we decide to use MobileNet version 2. So basically it's a convolutional neural network, and it's extremely, so it's the blue one here that you can see. So in this axis basically is the processing demand, I mean the power you need to compute, and here is the accuracy. So you see that the blue is not the best one, but it's the best trade-off between processing capabilities and accuracy. It's designed for really light device, like you can read it on a phone, basically. So we did some benchmark to find the best models, and then basically Now we are in this process of analyzing the results. So it's just an example here. So you see another overall accuracy, but you know since 2 days that you don't need to look at the overall accuracy to have a really good feeling about the data, but still you see that we have some confusion between class, but we are pretty good. And also what is here, the average accuracy was 72%, but it's at the pictures level, while when you have a parcel, as you've seen, you may have 100 pictures, so you can integrate and do majority voting. This is also something we are looking at, and to have a better confidence in your analysis. Okay, so just to show you some, here it's a pictures of the same classes, potato 1. So you see how diverse it is, right? So this is, even for a human, it's extremely difficult to know that it's potatoes. For a machine also. Well, the conclusion of this part is that it has a pretty high potential. We still have to really finalize the paper on this, but we are pretty confident that it could be used for operational purpose. Yeah, there is some work there. You need to tag the missing classes and the trash class. We have an ongoing campaign. And we are now also starting some tests for recognition for CAP services. So we have a pilot study with Catalonia. They provide us 25,000 images with label, and it's the surveyor really on the field and the inspector providing the image. And we are looking at a way at least to deal with 80% of the image. Even if there is only 20% remaining, it's still something. Well, we have also done other campaigns. One of these that was a campaign where we were looking at capturing the flowering gradient of rapeseed. So Mathieu Temens, which is here, was also deeply involved in this work, basically. And here also we've learned basically that it's extremely important to really well design the specification of what you want to collect for data. Because here we had a huge mess in the data, and we had to relabel a lot of data ourselves. We still have some work to be done there, but it was pretty interesting because here the idea was to, we use Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 to detect the peak of flowering of rapeseed, and then to link that with in situ observation of BBCH stage. Another campaign that we've done this year was done in Puglia, the south region of Italy. Some colleagues asked us, basically they are working on this region for a while now. All the olive trees are dying there because of Xylella fastidiosa. You should, Google it, it's extremely dramatic. And they basically trying to assess the loss of olive trees. So this started in 2013 with a coffee ornamental tree coming from Costa Rica, basically with this bacteria, and this bacteria is basically killing the tree by blocking the xylem flux, and then you have a defoliation of the tree. And what we want to do there is assess the loss of the trees, basically. So I've been in some region where they've declined. No, they've only producing 20% of the olives that they were producing 3 years ago. So you see, it's not only agronomic interest, but also social interest. So here we've done a 2-day study with 300 kilometers. And why I'm showing you do this, it's this blue stuff here, it's a LiDAR. Now we are analyzing the data, but just for you to have a glimpse, just an extract, this is the future of the type of data we will collect. Now this LiDAR was extremely expensive 10 years ago. Now with the autonomous car industry, you can buy this type of LiDAR for 1,000 euro. No, but the price are reducing because you will have this kind of LiDAR in every car, you know. So with this data, this is a challenge to deal with all this data because it's a really intensive processing. So we have to find new methodology, but there is also a lot of opportunities there for research. So that was the part for the survey. Now I will discuss briefly about the administration data. It doesn't look really sexy usually, administration data, and this is why I will spend just a little time on it. Administration data basically are data that are collected by public authority, and here I'm thinking about data that are collected for a different purpose than what you would like them to use. So the most evident that we think about, at least in EU, is that we have the land parcel identification system, which are the geometry of all the parcels in EU that are collected by the member state. You have here a little map that was done by Synergize, basically, where they assess for all the EU where it was open or not open. Because these data are still not open access everywhere. The definition of the legend is also different. So for example, in the Netherlands, for 10 years now it's available. You can download it really easily and use them. You have the 700,000 parcel with all the crop types, and you can do all your research. In Denmark, it's open. Austria, now Flanders. You have different countries moving to this, but countries like Germany, it's not open at all. So you have also different sensibility there, and it's pretty interesting. Another types of data. So these data are used for the farmer declaration verification. I don't know how much of you are familiar with the Common Agricultural Policy, but the goal of the lecture is not about this for sure, so I'll try not to talk too much about this, but if you have questions, feel free. Well, another type of data that we were interested in is data collected by statistics. Pierre mentioned it 2 days ago, that you cannot use remote sensing to derive area estimation. You remember this? You cannot do pixel counting. Well, this is a bridge that people are trying to do between statistics and remote sensing. Well, there are several projects, including the Sen4Stat project, which is looking at this, but different opportunities at different places. In the EU, Eurostat is the DG from the European Commission in charge of collecting statistics. And every 3 years, they're doing the so-called Lucas survey. Lucas, basically, it's an in-situ survey where they collect information about land use and land cover. So every 2 kilometers in Europe, there is a point on a regular grid. And from this point, you take a stratified sample, and you select point, and you send people there to collect a lot of information. A lot of information could be, for sure, land use, land cover, and photos of different cardinal direction, also photos of the crops. Also, for some of these points, we're taking soil samples already that they send also to the lab afterwards. They're doing a lot of different analysis. And it's an exercise that we are doing now for 15 years. Well, it was not at all designed to be used for remote sensing. It's designed for statistics. So you have, like, the point they're collecting is 3-meter diameter. And you have different other little specification, which makes this point extremely difficult to use for remote sensing. What is interesting, basically, is that last year, so that was the Lucas 2018 survey. So just to give you a floor, here you have the detail of the stratification. So all these points, they're sending people all over EU. So it's really huge, and you collect more than 300,000 points. Last year, so it involves a lot of actors for sure, but what is interesting is that they collect 77 classes, and for the crops, for example, we have the crop types. Okay, so you see, this is potential magic data, but I don't know why. But no, I know why indeed. But only few people were using that for remote sensing. First of all, the data are extremely not well documented. It's difficult to access, and it's not designed for remote sensing. This is why there was a pilot last year for 100,000 of these points. We had Copernicus components. So instead of doing the observation at the Lucas point, the surveyor has to go and to stop at the points he could reach, because sometimes they cannot reach the points, and to do an observation on a 100 by 100 meter square. Meaning that this is the distribution of all these points. So you see in blue, it's the points that were for which you have a Copernicus sample. And well, in reality, it's better than that, but it's an old representation of this. But you have like some polygons with different class. Look, sometimes it could be a bit less good, but we find a way to deal with that. So we're moving from purely statistic data to data that could be potentially used for remote sensing. And that's what we've tried to test. Here, for this case study, basically, we try to do a crop type map at 10-meter resolution for the whole Europe. Yeah, pretty ambitious, but was funny. So we use Sentinel-1 only here. So it was just proof of concept. Huh? We just wanted to know if we could use this data to do that. So we did some weekly average, and then we were looking at this Lucas Copernicus cropland. So after filtering and selecting only the croplands, we had about 5,500 polygons, which correspond to about 500,000 pixels. So that's the magic when you have polygons and not points. You can really increase your set substantially. Well, luckily, we had this Lucas points, which are not the polygons, to validate and to play around with this. Well, we've done this in Google Earth Engine, and we did also a stratification by different ecoregion, because for sure the crops have different phenology according to the location you are. Well, I will just show you the prototype here. Well, my colleague, indeed, Astrid, was this week in Mountain View to discuss with the Google engineer, because we have now the confirmation that we reached the limit of Google Earth Engine, because they say that you can do whatever you want, but still, when you want to do this type of thing, no, they're trying to help us really to figure out the technical problem there. But we are still really close to the results. So we did a really rough accuracy assessment so far, and the numbers were pretty good. But it's not finished, so I will not show you the final, but will be published soon, I hope. Well, what we demonstrate here with this statistic data, basically, is that Lucas data, which is typically, I would say, a dinosaur in the world of statistics, could be used potentially together with remote sensing. So it's something really exciting there. Now, we are not at the level yet to count the pixel, but I hope that soon the statistics will be also available from the remote sensing community. Well, this data for sure will be open and shared for the community. So the next point is the crowdsourcing. This is, again, a trendy word that you use everyone, but what is this? Crowdsourcing, basically, it's outsourcing task or data collection by a large group of non-professionals. It could be active crowdsourcing, meaning that basically you ask the crowd to collect a given information, or it could be opportunistic or passive. It means that people are sharing information without knowing what you will do with their data. I will show some example of both. I suggest you to check this paper from Minet et al., where they basically have done a review of the different crowdsourcing application, but it's a bit old already because it's moving fast, but still, I like the way they basically separate by users and contributors the different type of crowdsourcing application. They also introduced the terminology farm sourcing, which is basically a dedicated crowdsourcing for farmers. First example there was done by some colleagues from YASA in Austria, basically. After 3 years, no, they've done it 3 times. The project is called PhotoQuest Go. You have the link here. They've designed an app, basically, to collect Lucas point information. So you've seen what I've presented before. Say, okay, it's from me to you, Lucas, it costs 15 million euros per survey. So can you imagine after 15 years, it's a lot of money. Well, the idea here is to find a descriptive way to collect information, or at least to look if it's possible. Well, people, they have the phone, they have the points, and they have to go to the points and take the pictures, take the information. It's a simplified Lucas protocol, so you don't have the 200 variables that the surveyor are collecting, but still you have a really valuable information. And also, what they've done here, which is pretty interesting, is that they've tried to open a kind of market. It was a proof of concept study, where people get paid to go to the point. And they get paid more money if the point is hard to reach. So you can see, there's a lot of gamification there, which is potentially, you can do this. Well, we are pushing to have a real Lucas funding to have a crowdsourcing campaign, but it's still on the pipe, and I hope we will manage to do that in the future. Well, we still in the, if we consider looking at opportunistic crowdsourcing, that's what we've done here. So it was a study where I mentioned already this Mapillary database when we were on the field. So Mapillary is the biggest platform providing Street View imagery with open access. Meaning you have Google Street View, which is not open access, definitely. You cannot do machine learning on the image. But Mapillary, so it's here, you can. Okay? So you can harvest the data, doing stuff on the data, and you can also upload your own data. So basically, you have Google Maps, OpenStreetMap, and you have Google Street View, Mapillary. You see? Well, as they have more than 500 million of images, we were thinking, well, it may be a good source of information for agriculture, indeed. We should look at it. So we did a little study of this. First of it, we were looking at the availability of the data. So we used this Lucas grid that I've shown before, every 2 kilometers, and we send a lot of requests to the server to know which data were available there, and we analyze the information. So the idea basically was to assess the spatial availability of the Mapillary platform. Well, this is a first start, but also we wanted to know about usability, meaning can we use this data for agriculture monitoring potentially? And for this, we did that in the Netherlands. Why are we always doing stuff in the Netherlands? This is a good question. Because they have a really open access data. So if you have an open access data, basically you bring innovation. And here, they have all the parcel open, so that's why we've done this. Well, to do that, the first result that we've known, I will show it quickly here, basically, so is that here you have the green points are basically the points for which you have pictures available, while the blue are the ones for which you don't have pictures available. So you see there is some pattern for sure. This type of platform are extremely biased in the city and urbanized place because you have much more contributor there. So we were thinking basically that in the basically in the rural area it will be really low. But when you look at the number, arable land and permanent crops, you have about between 36 and 40% of the points for which you have image. Having image doesn't mean that you can use them for agricultural monitoring. Yeah? This is the question afterwards. And we also assess that by country. We also observe a lot of difference, like countries like Malta, but it's super small for sure. They have 100% coverage. Netherlands, Belgium is not so bad, 80%. But then you have Bulgaria, where only 12% are available. And typically, this is a platform where it depends of your community, right? If you have a lot of people sharing pictures, you have a lot of pictures. But you have no control on it. That's why we call it opportunistic crowdsourcing. Then the next question was to look at, for a given place, if we can do agricultural monitoring or if there are some pictures from the parcel. And to do this, also with Momo, we designed basically a way to calculate the pseudo field of view of all the image available for the Netherlands. So it was 17 million of image from more than 200 type of sensor, because there it's a crowdsourcing platform. You may have iPhone, 360 cam, different types of camera. So they all have different lens and different specificities. So basically you have a kind of triangle for all these images that you match then with the parcels, the 700,000 parcels that are open accessly available in the Netherlands. And you check for a given growing season, basically, and for different types of crops, if you have data. Well, here was a spatial, just to show it spatially. So here is when it's really blue, basically, it means that you have a lot of parcel. And here, when it's really blue, it means that you have a lot of image. So you see there is this gradient that we explained. Well, this is for the 3 years, 2016, 17, and 18. You see the number of image uploads every month. And you see that in comparison to the crop calendar in the Netherlands, it seems that potentially usable, basically. It means basically that here you have 200,000 image uploaded in May. And we decided to focus only on 1 year to do more detailed assessment, 2017. And then we look at each parcel if there are how many of each crops, how many of each parcel have at least one image available for 2017. And that's what you see here. So grassland, for example, 15% of the grassland parcel in the Netherlands have at least one image in 2017. Well, what does it mean having at least one image? This is for sure something to discuss. Then we look also at the revisits. So here it's for the different crops, basically, how many at least unique image you get per month. So if you have 12, it means that during 12 months in 2017, you have at least one image per month. Okay, so you have this typical shape here, meaning that for some parcels, you have a lot of observation and other not. And that's just to show an example here. This parcel in 2017 was observed more than 200 times. Can you imagine that 200 pictures are available for this super small parcel? And then also to show that having pictures, it doesn't solve the problem. Huh? We still have, this is typically, you see the parcel over there, extremely difficult to classify still, even with computer vision. So now the next step is we have assessed basically that there are a lot of data there. It has a huge potential, but we have to demonstrate also that we can use this information in an automated way.
You understood why? There should be something very interesting there.
Yeah, we know why. I will. Indeed, there is a guy which is totally crazy about Mapillary living in the street next door. Indeed, I'm not showing that here, but we have also assessed for each contributor how many images they contribute and how often also. And you have the typical pattern that you can find in any crowdsourcing platform, like also Wikipedia and OpenStreetMap, is that you have really few people contributing a lot. So this is also one of the weakness or the strength of the system. But now, recently, Mapillary launched the so-called marketplace. We have not yet tested, but we are, because we published this result together with Mapillary. We published that in a paper. And now they have this marketplace where the idea is that you can pay, and they will open that to the community, and people could bring image in the platform, right? So interesting. Let's see. I don't say it's the magic, but still it's something interesting to consider. Well, still in the opportunistic crowdsourcing, we have the social media for sure. So a lot of people are talking about using social media. Social media, and basically, I've seen only one paper from Sam Zipper. You can Google it, where he is really looking at how to use Twitter to basically detect the emergence of mice. Here we did that in the GRC, basically with the tweet account of the Commission. We start a Yellow Flowers EU campaign, basically asking people to share pictures of flowering rapeseed last year. We had more than 100 contributors. It was really just to try. Huh? And then basically with these contributors, we've tried to map the day of year of flowering of rapeseed. So it was, the results are not really robust here, but what it was demonstrated was pretty interesting. Is basically you have different types of people, citizens, scientists, farmers, photographers, and nice persons, let's say. And also pretty interesting also with all the citizen science concept, basically, is that you may have people like here, like beautiful, right? Monocultures destroying our biodiversity. And then you have also farmers showing basically that, oh, I'm spraying late in the evening to avoid bees, or I've lost all my field because I cannot harvest it, but I'm letting it for the beautiful bees. You know, there are some social stuff to consider there. Well, the last part, I will be really fast on this part, which about the farmers' data, because I don't know so much about it, and it's really something for the future. But we are also helping a little company here. It was a Serbian company with a Lada Niva. You can recognize the nice camera there. And they've designed a crop support app that you can find here. Basically, we are 200 parcels with farmers. We are basically cross-checking the information. To finish this talk a bit, I think we have to consider also new business that are emerging now. This is extremely important. We are pretty far away of this in the remote sensing. It was mentioned by Pierre also, I think, in a former talk. This is the OneSoil platform that you know. And it was announced last week that basically OneSoil is starting to provide lending to farmers. This is the 360 FarmNet platform. I don't know if you are aware of this typical platform. Basically, they're providing a €0 cost for the farmers, and it's a full integrated management tools where they have also remote sensing there, but they're selling seeds, fertilizer, and so on. So this is a bit the question on which type of model of agribusiness will be in the future. Because data could be shared within the farm by survey drones, agribots, machinery, and farming. It could be also exchanged between farm to farm, especially for environmental evidence showing. We have no project where basically farmers are sharing their environmental performance. Pretty interesting. And also from farm to food. This is a long topic here, but people want to know about the food they're buying, how it was grown, where it was grown. So you have a lot of data exchange there. And then if you are interested in this field, I suggest you to look at this, this document, which is the EU Code of Conduct on Agricultural Data Sharing. They provide a first attempt, basically, to define who is the owner of what. Is the farmer owner of the data when they are harvesting, basically, wheat, for example, or is it John Deere because they're taking the data? Could they sell them to someone else? And this document, basically, they're trying to set up an answer to this, and it's pretty interesting. Well, what is the take-home message? First, there is a new paradigm in remote sensing. We have free global high spatial and temporal resolution and almost free computing capabilities. In situ, data remains the holy grail of remote sensing. You've seen, we can do it at some point, so look at it. Visual data capture evolving, AI, crowdsourcing, and brings a huge opportunity. Also, this data need to be open and shared, which is really something we advocate for, because there is a huge business behind, like the yield data and all these things. It's really difficult to get, but it could really enrich the scientific communities. And I will finish by this word, that sky is not the limit anymore, because we have everything from the sky now. So thank you for your attention. I would like to thank, so I've already thanked Mathieu and Momo, but also all the people we are working with, really extremely nice people. And I would like to point you to this really important and advertise a bit. We are hiring 2 trainees now. So one is really to work in our group. So the first one, computer vision, deadline for 2 October. And the other one is another group in our unit. But you can talk to me afterwards if you're interested in this type. So it's 5 months trainee, paid trainee. Basically, it's if you like this type of topic, it could be interesting. Well, 46 minutes. I don't know if we have question now. Or burning question.
On this topic, there can be many questions. I hope Raphael will be around for the closing ceremony.
I have to leave for my plane at 1:45, so right. I will be there till there. So
yeah, then you will have the chance to ask more questions, but only
okay,
the only one.
To give the mic.
So first of all, thank you for this very inspiring and stimulating presentation. One very practical question that is a utility. Up to now, if you have to do statistics at NUTS-3 level, for instance, on crops, would you prefer to do using crop maps derived from remote sensing or using Lucas data?
This is Lucas, no, I don't think so. No. I will not use any of them, indeed, to be honest.
Lucas is not designed for crop statistics at all. Lucas is land cover, environmental.
Sure, but you are retrieving also data on crops.
That could be made at country level, and at the beginning they started to produce statistics at country level, but the country said, your statistics are different from ours, please don't publish them.
This is a topic extremely sensitive because the statistics, you're probably aware of this, but it's still, we have Eurostat. Basically, Eurostat is collecting the statistics in EU, at least, from the member states. And yeah, I cannot really extend about this, but this is a question for a whole day of conference, I think.
Sure.
Well, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.